Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
John Wilmot, the second Earl of Rochester, was an influential English poet and courtier during the Restoration period under King Charles II. He was a prominent figure who represented a departure from the strict religious and moral constraints of the preceding Puritan era. In his time, Rochester was renowned as the best English satirist, as described by his contemporary Andrew Marvell. He was widely recognized as the most significant poet and the most knowledgeable among the Restoration wits. His poetry, though controversial and frequently censored during the Victorian era, experienced a resurgence in appreciation from the 1920s onward. Renowned literary figures like Graham Greene and Ezra Pound re-evaluated his work. Critic Vivian de Sola Pinto connected Rochester's libertinism to Hobbesian materialism, highlighting the philosophical underpinnings of his lifestyle and thought. One of Rochester's most famous works during his lifetime, and still well known today, is A Satire Against Reason and Mankind. This satirical piece is a notable example of his bold and provocative style, challenging prevailing societal norms and beliefs. John Wilmot, the second Earl of Rochester, was born on April 1, 1647, at Ditchley House in Oxfordshire. His father, Henry Wilmot, was a renowned cavalier, war hero, and a key figure in helping Charles II escape to the continent during the Commonwealth period. His mother, Anne St. John, hailed from a noble Puritan family in Wiltshire, and she possessed a strong-willed character. At the age of 7, Rochester began receiving private tutoring, followed by attending a grammar school in Burford 2 years later. Tragedy struck in 1658 when his father, Henry, passed away, making John Wilmot the Earl of Rochester at just 11 years old. In January 1660, he was admitted as a fellow commoner to Wadham College, Oxford, despite his young age, thanks in part to the influence of family friends, like Edward Hyde, Earl of Clarendon, who awarded him an honorary MA degree. As a gesture of gratitude, King Charles II granted Rochester an annual pension of £500. In November 1661, Charles sent him on a 3-year grand tour of France and Italy, providing him with a valuable education in European thought and culture. Rochester returned to London in 1664, marking his formal debut at the Restoration Court during Christmas Day. King Charles II took an interest in Rochester's life and suggested a marriage between him and the wealthy heiress Elizabeth Mallet. However, Elizabeth's relatives opposed the union, leading Rochester to conspire with his mother to abduct the young countess. Samuel Pepys documented this attempted abduction on May 28, 1665, and it resulted in Rochester's imprisonment in the Tower of London for 3 weeks. He was only released after penning a penitent apology to the king. To redeem himself, Rochester joined the Navy during the Second Dutch War in the winter of 1665 and displayed remarkable courage in battle, earning him the status of a war hero. He was subsequently appointed as a gentleman of the bedchamber to the king, granting him significant privileges and a substantial pension. Rochester also resumed his courtship of Elizabeth Mallet and, defying her family's wishes, eloped with her in January 1667. They were married and had 4 children. In October 1667, despite being underage, Rochester was granted a special license to enter the House of Lords early, a move orchestrated by the king to strengthen his supporters among the lords. During this time, he formed a close relationship with actress Nell Gwynn, who would later become the mistress of Charles II, and their association elevated his influence and status within the court. John Wilmot, the second Earl of Rochester, led a dual life between rural domesticity and a flamboyant existence at the court, where he gained notoriety for his drunkenness, lively conversations, and extravagant behavior as part of the merry gang. This group, active for around 15 years starting in 1665, included figures like Henry Jermyn, Charles Sackville, John Sheffield, Henry Killigrew, Sir Charles Sedley, playwrights William Wycherley and George Etheridge, and George Villiers. Rochester's heavy drinking and erratic conduct led to him being continuously inebriated for 5 years, resulting in wild and unpredictable actions. Samuel Pepys documented an incident in which Rochester struck Tom Killigrew during a gathering with the king and the Dutch ambassador, leading to his temporary banishment from the court. Despite this, the king later called for his return. In 1673, Rochester began training Elizabeth Barry as an actress, and she became the most famous actress of her time. They became romantically involved in 1675, leading to a tumultuous relationship that lasted about 5 years and produced a daughter. The affair soured as Rochester grew resentful of her success. Rochester's standing diminished further when his friend and the king's advisor, George Villiers, lost his influence in 1673. Rochester composed a satire criticizing the king's preoccupation with sexual matters rather than governance, which resulted in his exile from the court until February. During this time, he resided at his estate in Atterbury. However, he was later appointed Ranger of Woodstock Park in February 1674 after persistent appeals. In June 1675, Rochester vandalized a sundial in the Privy Garden during a drunken spree, leading to his departure from court once again. His behavior continued to deteriorate, and in 1676, he was involved in a late-night altercation with the night watch, resulting in the death of one of his companions, Roger Downes. Rochester's reputation with the monarch hit a new low, and he briefly sought refuge at Tower Hill, where he assumed the persona of Dr. Bendo. Under this guise, he claimed to treat various gynecological disorders, including infertility, with some success. On occasion, he also adopted the identity of Mrs. Bendo to privately inspect young women without arousing their husband's suspicions. By the time he reached the age of 33, John Wilmot, the second Earl of Rochester, was suffering from severe health issues, often attributed to the effects of tertiary syphilis, gonorrhea, or other sexually transmitted diseases, exacerbated by his alcoholism. However, Carol Richards contested this conventional belief, proposing that his cause of death was more likely renal failure due to chronic nephritis, a condition also known as Bright's disease. During his final weeks, Rochester's mother arranged for him to receive care from her religious associates, particularly Gilbert Burnet, who would later become the Bishop of Salisbury. As Burnet left Rochester's side, the Earl is said to have murmured his last words, "Has my friend left me? Then I shall die shortly." In the early morning of July 26, 1680, Rochester passed away peacefully, without any noticeable signs of distress. He was laid to rest at Spelsbury Church in Oxfordshire. Reverend Burnet published an account titled Some Passages of the Life and Death of the Honourable John Wilmot, Earl of Rochester, in which he portrayed Rochester as having a deathbed renunciation of his libertine lifestyle and conversion to Anglican Christianity. However, some scholars have questioned the accuracy of this account, suggesting that Burnet may have shaped the narrative to enhance his own reputation. Nevertheless, Graham Greene, in his biography of Wilmot, found Burnet's book to be convincing.